see why I said I hope you find it stimulating. It's a hard film to enjoy. It's pretty bleak and it's pretty relentless.
But I might just start with a piece of trivia. I believe you've met director Yu.
Yeah, the first time I went to Korea in 1999, I went to the Busan Film Festival, and Hyun-mok, he was the subject of the retrospective that year, and he was it's about 75 years old. He had this kind of shock of white hair and these penetrating eyes that would come out from his glasses and these dark rims at the top. But he was also kind of hard to see because he was a chain smoker, and there was literally like this cloud of smoke around him all the time. He's just like puffing away. In those days, when you went to the Busan Film Festival, like you met everybody. It was very egalitarian. You met all the directors, you met all the actors. It was they were very welcoming. And you know, I mean, it wasn't. I just met him. You know, it wasn't like we had an in-depth conversation or anything. But you know, real presence about him. And he, I saw him a couple of times in the subsequent times I went to Korea, and then about 2004, 2005, cloud of smoke was gone. He had tubes coming from his nose, taking oxygen and what have you. And he died in 2009, had a cerebral brain hemorrhage, and he was 85 by that time. So tobacco smoking obviously didn't slow him down. But yeah. So you know, it was kind of interesting in those days where you could meet all the old guard of the Korean directors.
And in terms of the title of the film, some people may know there's also a Korean restaurant down the road called Obusan. Can you maybe comment on, you mentioned before it has a number of different English titles as well?
Yeah, I mean the thing is, as I said before the screen, it does, to an audience that doesn't know what they're about to see, Aimless Bullet sounds like it's going to be a crime movie or something, and even director Yu had said that even the Korean title, Obusan, was regarded as quite strange, and people didn't really know what to expect. And you know, as you saw in the film, it's really explained in the last reel of that kind of aimless direction of life. But also, it also kind of reflects the film in lots of ways, because you're going off on different tangents all the time. That said, you know, like it's not an aimless film. It's a very purposefully made film, but it was made somewhat haphazardly. You know, we're talking about the impact of poverty. Director Yu had a lot of problems because he wanted to push political issues, even though it was a time of artistic freedom. This bleakness was not that popular. It was hard to get money, and so what would happen is they would film for a few days. They'd get some money, film for a few days, and then everything would just stop until they could get some more money, and they would film again. And I think that's part of what accounts for the various styles of the film.
It's also referred to as a piece of realist cinema.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe talk more about that sort of Korean realist cinema.
Yeah, when the Busan Festival did the retrospective on director Yu, they called him the pathfinder of Korean realism. Now, there are aspects of the film that are realist, and particularly I'm thinking of the scene where the scenes where Chol Ho was coming home, and it's that stuff where things are shot in available light. Also the scene where the Yong Ho meets the nurse who had nursed him after his shooting injuries. It's got that kind of washed out appearance again. So there are scenes which are very realistic and very straightforward, and yet there are other scenes, like most of the nighttime scenes, are very dark, quite expressionistic in lots of ways, and bordering on the abstract when you get to those final scenes from the jumping from the back of the taxi cab out to the streets and seeing lots of cars, as if implying there are lots of taxi cabs having these stories. And then the final shot of all those headlights going around, it's very, very abstract. So I think the thing when they talk, the emphasis is actually on social realism and his willingness to kind of deal with social issues. So he's not like a realist filmmaker like, say, Ken Loach or Mike Leigh. It's just his willingness to engage with the issues. And he said, I've got a quote here from him, hang on a sec, where are we? He said, where are you? Poverty is one of many elements that calls for realism. When he filmed this, you know, he had a lot of trouble. It was a time of artistic freedom, but he was still experiencing some interference from the government in terms of getting this film released, and he didn't have a lot of time for the liberalism of that time. He thought it wasn't tough enough. He really wanted to push things, and then there was the military coup of 1961, and things actually got worse for him after that. He didn't like the new regime anymore. In fact, the new regime made it even more difficult for him to make films. He spent about a decade making what he called meaningless comedies. But all up, I mean, Obertan was his 7th film. He ended up making like 43 different films over the space of 40 odd years. He's one of those guys who he also taught cinema at Dongguk University. So he was very committed to the idea of making films, no matter what the circumstances were.
Raylene, the question.
The question was about the role of the grandmother in the film and the fact that the grandmother would have been through a lot more than the other characters in the film. Is it And by that you're implying the annexing by Japan and all that kind of stuff. I think, for everybody in that family, from the youngest child up, the trauma of the Korean War is just massive, and it's still, the fact that North and South are still separated, still locked in that kind of deadlock, and in Korean cinema generally, it's almost always there's some aspect of the film that can be brought back to that that division, that separation, and of people fighting themselves. There's no enemy in this picture, It's just trying to survive survive the situation. People fight wars for freedom and what have you, and this is one of the things about the film is like, the soldiers say at the start of the film, well, I was happier when I was in the army, I had more freedom. The woman says with a gun, we were, a gun solved everything in those days. And now, like, they've got these problems where it feels like nothing can be solved. But, it's not an upbeat film. You've only really got that one glimmer of hope, which is that the baby is born and maybe we can teach it to smile one day. But, I don't know, after I've been through everything else, I'm not really affirmed by that statement. It's a very thin, slender hope. He was a pretty intense guy, and I think he just really wanted to. My feeling is he wanted to reflect the hopelessness that people were experiencing at that time. And if you want to go somewhere with that, any kind of depiction of social issues is that you change things by depicting them. You don't change them by pretending that they don't exist and making, as he said, mindless comedies, that he had to do after that just to keep working as a director. So I think when you depict a social issue, and even if you do it grim without much optimism, the fact that you're depicting it is making a statement for change.